Little Hands, Big Attitude, Book 2, Little Steps, Big Changes, Chapter 5, Long Nights and Early Mornings.
This new development had me concerned. More of our kind in town would mean more attention from the human law. And the more of us there were, the more likely they would decide we were a threat and try to lock us away, or at least keep us separated from the humans. Maddie and Tom were my parents. They were the first to really treat me kindly, and the idea of being taken from them brought a tight knot into my stomach. That, and my old job called me back during my nap time. Shortly after my brief conversation with Knuckles, he put me in my cradle, and I had gone to sleep. And I'd dream of other worlds. I saw Sonic aloft in a palace in the sky, a pair of blue feathery wings protruding from his back. I saw Tails searching the seafloor in a submarine. Knuckles, an aged warrior standing over an established village on Angel Island. It seemed that my brother's other selves were doing well on their own. But why did the universe feel like I needed to check on them? The three I shared a house with were really the only versions of them I cared about. And then Maddie came home saying that 2 more from our planet had arrived. Two! What others of Sonic's friends in other realities traveled in groups of 2. My fellow science experiment traveled with 1 bat and 1 robotic pyromaniac. That's 3. Sonic's little fangirl sometimes traveled with a rabbit friend plus a chow. That's 3. The 2 reptiles had their insect apprentice. That's 3. So who? Oh no. I thought of a duo I knew all too well. I laid in my crib, staring up at the ceiling and clutching Ducky for dear life. I had no gods to pray to, practically being one myself. But if I had, I would have prayed for these 2 mystery Mobians to not be the 2 I was thinking about. It could easily be someone not usually associated with Sonic at all, but so far, our chances weren't great in that regard. Everyone knew who Sonic was in so many realities, that the idea of someone unfamiliar showing up was minuscule at best. I must have been making noise as I fretted, because then Maddie was coming and scooping me up into her arms. I felt a little bad for waking her. She must have been hard at work all day trying to get these 2 newcomers comfortable, and now I wasn't letting her get the sleep she needed. "Shh," she whispered, bouncing me a little as she rocked back and forth.
"It's okay,"
she whispered. I knew she was right. I knew that this wasn't that big of a deal. But that didn't stop my head from coming up with all sorts of possibilities. What if these newcomers recognized me for what I was, like Kaya had? What if they tried to take advantage of my weak, uncoordinated form and hurt me? All of the thoughts that I'd had when I first arrived here were whirring back into place. The fear of being taken away, of being hurt, of losing the only people that cared about me. But all of those thoughts I'd had, they'd been proven wrong. Way that I had gotten myself all wrung up into a tight ball had been for nothing, because these humans and their other adopted children didn't care about anything but loving me for who I was, or who they thought I was. They didn't know what I'd done. Man, it was really hard to pull yourself out of a downward spiral of anxiety on your own. And it was hard to get help pulling yourself out when you couldn't properly speak. Maddie placed her fingers on my back, doing the same massaging motion Sonic had done my first night here to calm me down. It was soothing and seemed to help with the tight knot in my stomach, but not entirely. It still hurt. And that, accompanied by mild fever and pain brought on by my erupting teeth, left me feeling utterly miserable.
"I know.
Maddie whispered.
Life's so hard when you're little, huh?"
Yes it was.
Silver felt like the morning sun came far too soon, but an odd and yet vaguely familiar smell pulled him out of his deep slumber. The fact that he was still somewhat able to breathe as his eyes fluttered open was an improvement, but he winced at the light shining through the window, and he groaned as he pulled his blanket over his face. What time was it? How long had he been asleep this time? He wasn't in the back seat of Miss Allison's vehicle anymore. He really needed to stop going to sleep in one place and waking up in another.
"Good morning, Silver."
Miss Allison's voice was soft and chipper. Much too chipper for early morning, Silver thought. His ear twitched as she gently stroked his shoulder with her hand. And then he pulled his head out from under the blanket and found she'd positioned herself to block the sun.
"How did you sleep?"
Silver took in a slightly wheezy breath. looked up at her.
Deep?
He muttered.
I don't remember getting here.
That's what NyQuil does to ya.
The woman giggled.
Feel any more like yourself?
Silver nodded. His head still felt like it was inflated, and he still ached. But he found to his relief he could at least sit up on his own now.
Better. Not much, but better.
Good.
Silver looked around the room he was in, finding it holding some items with which he was familiar, but in much better condition. He was on a couch, some wooden cabinets holding up some sort of machine with a black screen, and a tall lamp in the corner.
Where's Blaze?
He asked, not seeing her in the room.
She's taking a shower.
A what?
Silver rubbed his eyes.
You Hewies can just command a rain shower?
Allison grinned.
Sort of. We have a system that shoots water down from a pipe onto your head. Kind of like a rain shower, but indoors. I wanted her to get some of that smoky smell off of her before she puts on her new clothes.
Silver lifted his hand to his nose and tried to sniff himself, but his nose was still clogged.
I don't smell anything.
Well, that's because you're congested and used to the smell of smoke. No worries though, it's not really bad, I promise.
She then held out a small package, some crackers inside of it.
You wanna try eating something?
Silver nodded. He didn't really feel hungry, but he knew he hadn't eaten anything the day before, so he probably should at least try to eat something. He took the package from her, and then noticed a small cup of water on the table in front of the couch.
Is that for me too?
Uh-huh. Remembering you need to eat and drink fully, okay?
He nodded and then sniffed again.
Miss Allison, what's that smell? It's kinda sweet, but
Oh, that's probably my raspberry tea.
She informed, turning around and taking another cup from the table.
Here, sniff.
She held it a little closer, and he inhaled, giving the nod as the scent got stronger.
yes, that's it. I didn't know you could make tea with berries.
You can make tea with a lot of different plants, but raspberry is my favorite.
She took a seat beside him, but his eyes had adjusted enough that the sun once more being in his face didn't bother him as much.
So once you finish there, do you feel like you could handle getting a shower yourself? I have a feeling it'll help dislodge some of that crud in your system.
Silver paused from sticking a cracker in his mouth.
Are you subtly suggesting that I am giving off an odor you dislike, Miss Allison?
The woman grinned.
Are you eloquently asking if you stink?
The hedgehog smiled a bit, and then placed the cracker into his mouth. Maybe staying with this human wouldn't be so bad. He was almost finished with the crackers and the sweet water when he heard footsteps on the hardwood, and looked over. Blaze stepped out of the hallway, her hands folded in front of her and her head dipped in embarrassment, as she stood wearing a pink tunic, white leggings, and her new sneakers.
So, how do I look?
Fabulous, young lady.
Allison assured.
Does it make you feel better to wear clothes without holes and that fit?
Blaze nodded.
It does actually. I've never had brand new clothes before, and makes a difference.
Told ya. Now come here and I'll get those tangles out of your hair.
Blaze came over to her and took a seat on the couch beside her, turning the back of her head towards the woman while also looking at Silver.
How are you feeling, Silver?
Better,
Silver covered his mouth as he fought through a coughing fit.
but not all the way.
Better is good, thou.
She reached out into his hand, squeezing it gently.
I hate to admit it, but I was worried you wouldn't make it.
Be you afraid when a loved one is sick is normal, sweetheart. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Allison paused in her work to put a hand on Blaze's shoulder.
Even ladies could be afraid.
Blaze smiled a little, and that made Silver smile too. He hadn't seen her smile much as they grew up. She always tried to be the serious one, the one who had to set an example, even though there was no one else but him to show that example to. After a few more minutes of quiet, Silver had finished his crackers and water, and Blaze's hair had been untangled and pulled up and out of her way.
There we are.
Allison hummed softly, and then turned to Silver.
What do you say? You want to try?
Silver didn't see what harm it would cost to try, so he gave a nod. It took him a moment to get untangled from the blanket tucked around him, and it was very cold out from under it, but he didn't feel quite as cold as he had before. So perhaps the medicine had worked. He leaned against the wall for support as he followed her from the living room and down the hall. Pausing at a door she opened. He felt the hot, moist air escape out as the door opened, sticking to his fur as he limped into the room.
I'm gonna say we do this sitting down.
Allison decided, and she pulled a curtain back and to reveal a large, porcelain tub.
Climb on in.
Okay,
Silver murmured curiously, and he took a seat on the bottom of the tub. She removed the wrappings around his hands and feet, and then took off Blaze's old tunic he was still wearing, leaving him completely exposed. She ran her hand over the top of his hand gently.
Your markings pulse in and out when you're asleep, you know. I guess it's a part of your powers?
Silver nodded slowly.
You know about light powers?
I know the little blue hedgehog that lives here in town, so I figured that you probably could do something special too.
She then stood up and walked to the other end of the tub, pointing to a lever on the wall.
Okay, so this is how we turn off the water. The blue is cold water, and the red is hot water. This head is where the water comes from.
She pulled the head off of the wall and aimed the holes down the ground in front of him, and then turned the lever. Almost immediately, the same clear, untainted water came rushing out and splashing onto the bottom of the tub. It didn't fill up, however, the water running down a drain at the other end.
Alright, I want you to reach out and let me know when it's not too cold or too hot, alright?
Silver nodded, holding his hand out as she allowed it to fall on his fingers. It took a moment or so, and the water was initially quite cold and sent shivers through his body. But finally, it was at least tolerable.
There!
He whispered. Allison nodded, and then pulled the head around and began to let the water fall onto his fur and quills. The warmth soaked into his fur, and he slumped a bit with a relaxed sigh. He watched as the water moving sown towards the drain went from clear to a dirty gray color, bits of black speckled in it. Was he really that dirty? The water was coming out of the tiny holes hard enough to shove its way under his quills and fur, digging out dirt and ash he wasn't even aware of. It also massaged his aching muscles and relaxed him. She then placed her hand over his face and sprayed the top of his head for a moment, minding his ears before turning the head off.
Done already?
Allison smirked.
Not quite. I just don't want to waste water while I'm doing this next part.
She grabbed a small piece of cloth and then wiped at the inside of his ears and his face very gently with it. She then grabbed a bottle of something, squirting some of it out onto her hands, and then gently massaging it into his quills.
What's this for?
He asked, finding that she'd been right. The hot, moist air was helping to clear up his nose.
It's soap. It'll help get more of the ash and soot out of there.
Once the soap had been thoroughly scrubbed in, the water was back on, and washing it out, and Silver watched the water run black once more.
Gee, I had no idea I was this dirty.
He whispered.
Had a feeling you get used to a lot of things, and sometimes you never realize what it feels like to be clean or out of pain until that dirt and pain is gone.
She helped him to stand to get the last of the dirt and grime off of him, before once more turning off the water and grabbing a large, fluffy piece of fabric and wrapping it around him. The cold of his fever was back as he stepped out, but the fabric, despite not being very thick, was warm and cozy.
Nothing feels much better than being clean. And look at that.
She picked up a small mirror and handed it to him so that he could see his reflection.
Now that is what I call silver.
Silver smiled a bit. His fur had always been light gray, but she was right. Now that it was clean and clear of the soot and ash, it was truly like polished metal. It was truly silver.
Alright, now let's see if we can find you some spare stops, and then we can all head out for the clinic. I have work to get done this morning.
Silver nodded slowly.
I suppose you don't trust us to be left on our own in your home.
You two get all settled, and I know you're not gonna accidentally hurt yourselves. Then it'll be fine. But until then, it's take your little alien guests to work week.